National teams that had the best transfer window. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Ladies and gentlemen, please drop your nominations down below in the comments section. Which countries do you think absolutely slayed the transfer window this summer? This is part 2 of the series. You can find part 1, the national teams that had the worst transfer windows, already out on the channel. Dropped a couple weeks ago. I know this episode took a little bit of time to record, but I'm kind of glad it did because the window's over. It's done. There's no more speculation. We know exactly what we're going to be talking about. I'm looking for national teams that had moves with a lot of clout, who got a bunch of transfers that were talked about, who saw a bunch of upgrades at the club level. Was there any player that downgraded? Were these transfers ones that will actually help out the performance of the national team? So I have several teams for y'all. Some are a little hipster, some are a little obvious. Let's go ahead and get into it. Before I do though, guys, make sure you smash the like button and hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And let me know your nominations, of course, down below in the comments. First team I'm going with might not be that surprising because I've already made an entire video dedicated to them, and that is Canada. I mean, looking at some of the movement from these Canadian players is absolutely insane. What I really liked about Canada's transfer window is that you saw the star players get big moves, but then you also saw the role players get some pretty big moves. Canada is probably headlined by Ismail Kone signing to Marseille, Moise Bombito also going to OG Nice, Cornelius going to Marseille. I mean, Canada sent 4 players to Ligue 1, for God's sake. If we're talking guys who are kind of rotational for the Canadian national team, guys like Chouanier going to Grasshopper, Theo Blair going to Auxerre, and Liam Miller to Hull City. So I think honestly across the board, we're just seeing a bunch of upgrades. Like, I genuinely do not think there is one Canadian player, at least not one with any significance whatsoever, who downgraded this summer. And I think it's important to note as we go through this video that success is always relative, right? Like, it's not fair to have the same expectations for Germany as it is for Canada. If Germany only sent 4 players to a top 5 league, it would be the biggest German L since the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. But this is a Canadian CONCACAF team we're talking about here. This is absolutely massive. Not only was it massive for Canada, but it was easily the best window of any CONCACAF team, and I don't even think it's close. Like, I'm just going to say it, you are a certified hater if you do not think Canada were massive winners in this window. Like I said, if you want to see more of my thoughts about this, there's a full video out on the channel, shameless plug. Now, another objectively massive winner from this transfer window, we're taking it to Asia this time, the Japanese national team. I'm going to be honest, it's getting a little ridiculous how they just keep owning every single transfer window. I mean, I'm looking at the list now. The sheer amount of players moving to Europe is insane. I would say you have your headliners here like Hiroki Ito going to Bayern Munich and Daichi Kamada going to Crystal Palace. Then you got some of these more underrated moves that I still think are very fire, like Zion Suzuki to Parma, Sugawara to Southampton. And then you even have a couple random ones that I still think are bangers, like Asano to Mallorca, Maikumo to Alkmaar. Even Shogo Taniguchi somehow got a move to Europe. Even guys like Yuki Ohashi, who have 0 caps for the Japanese national team and is 28 years old, got a move from the J League to
Blackburn.
He started every single game in the championship. He's got 4 goals in his first 5. Like, there's just no stopping Operation Blue Lock right now. I saw this tweet, and I need to verify if this is true, but apparently Japan now have 80 players abroad in Europe. Let that sink in, man. 80 players? I think they have 15 or 16 in England alone. For the love of God, Southampton signed 2 Japanese players in the same window. They're operating like I do when I'm playing FIFA. The sheer rise of Japanese football from 1990 to now is ridiculous. We're only talking 30, 35 years since the formation of the J League. And I'm going to put a hot take here. I genuinely think in the next decade or so, we are going to see Japanese players overtake some of those, I'm going to call them second-tier nations when it comes to exportation to Europe, because the ROI for them is simply too high. I really think you're going to see more and more clubs looking at Japanese players versus somebody like an Uruguayan or a Colombian even and say, I think we're going to go and look at the Japanese market. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. You look at these decades of steady improvement of Japanese football. You look at the national team and how strong they are. I mean, I think they're a top 10 national team in the world. You look at the performances at the World Cup even. You look at star players for the Japanese national team who are big, important figures for their clubs. And these are not scrub-ass club teams. And still now, at least for the time being, they're relatively cheap. I mean, the most expensive move for a Japanese player this summer somehow was Hiroki Ito for $26 million. The second most expensive signing was Sugawara to Southampton for $8 million. I mean, the Japanese national team are like some hotcakes, or I guess like some Japanese souffle pancakes. I mean, you better get them while they're hot, because I promise you, these valuations are not going to stay like this forever. So again, just a massive win for Japan. Let's take it on to the next national team, and we're going to go to Africa this time, and that is, somewhat surprisingly, Ghana. Unlike many of their African rivals, I feel like Ghana actually sent quite a few young players to Europe and actually upgraded at the club level as well. I already talked about them in the worst transfer window segment. I mean, teams like Nigeria and Cameroon, it was looking diabolical. Now, the Ghanaian national team is diabolical, and I hate to say this, but they are bordering on being a finished national team. But I think you at least have to look at this window and say there's a bit of positivity here. And I'm not saying this is the greatest window in African history. I'm just saying for the Black Stars, this is pretty big. And honestly, they need all the positivity that they can get right now, because their AFCON qualification and their World Cup qualification is in serious jeopardy. But still, I think some of these moves could help the team rebound, if not for the next AFCON, then I think the one following. I think some of the biggest ones, Ibrahim Osman going from the Danish league to Brighton. He was then loaned to Feyenoord. But Brighton's kind of that team, right, that like, if you're purchased by Brighton, I just trust you, because I trust the Brighton board more than I trust my own father, because those guys just do not miss. So I think that's a very exciting signing for the Ghanaians. He only has 2 caps for the national team, but he's also 19 years old, so let's not freak out. He was on the bench for the last round of AFCON qualifying. Maybe they should have played him, because they did not win a single one of those fixtures. Another big move that I like, and I've seen this player a lot more because he's in the Premier League, is Isahaku Fatawu, who plays for Leicester City after signing from Sporting for $20 million. I think Osman was pretty expensive as well, so even we just talked about Japan. I mean, look at the valuations for the Ghanaian players versus the Japanese right now, right? I think Ghanaians have more tenure than Japanese. I just don't know if that's always going to be the case. But anyways, I digress. Let's get back to this. Fatawu, I actually think he's been quite good to start the season for Leicester City. He started 3 of his first 4 games of the season. He started 4 of the last 5 games for the Black Stars. Got a goal and assist in that time. I think this is a very important move for the current Ghanaian national team. I've talked about how I think a lot of these moves are more like 2, 3, maybe even 4 years down the road benefiting the Black Stars. But I think that Fatawu is going to be kind of a here and now signing. That's kind of like an American sports saying. Some other moves, though, that I liked for the Black Stars. Ernest Nuama from the Belgian 2nd Division to Lyon for $30 million. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, sometimes I get it. They're young. There's potential there. But, like, sometimes the valuation here is insane. 20 years old, so another very young Ghanaian player, but already has 10 caps for Ghana. So this might kind of be a mixture of, like, future, but also the here and now. And lastly, Ibrahim Sulemana to Atalanta for $8 million. 21 years old. He only has 1 cap for Ghana. He's only played 1 game so far this season. But I think the next generation of Ghana it was pretty well set up through this transfer window. There wasn't really, like, a home run here for Ghana. Like, it's not like Iñaki Williams signed to Real Madrid or something crazy like that, but I think was a lot of like second base hits, to use a baseball metaphor. Another team that I think had a very good transfer window overall is Turkey. Like, I was looking at some of these moves and I kind of feel like the Turks balled out. I mean, if I'm tripping, let me know in the comments. I'm gonna go over some of the moves, and God forgive me for my pronunciation here. I'm gonna try my best. Ferdi Kadioglu from Fenerbahce to Brighton for $30 million. This was such a banging transfer. I love everything about it. 24 years old, played every single second for Turkey at the Euros. Again, whenever Brighton buys you, I'm just like, hey, I believe you. You know, I didn't watch him a lot when he was in the Turkish Super League, but obviously at the Euros, I saw every single game from Turkey, and I was very, very impressed from him. I do think the one downside potentially about this move is the competition at the left back position for Brighton. I do not think it's easy to get in there. You're dealing with homegrown talent in Pervis Estupiñán, but I think he's got a chance, and I think he's got the talent. He's only played 30 minutes to start the season for Brighton, but he already has a goal, and he's been dealing with a hamstring injury as well, so I think it's a great move for Turkey. Enes Unyal, another move that I liked from Getafe to Bournemouth for $18 million. Unyal, I think, is 27, 28 years old, so not really like a youngin getting on the move, but second straight Turk we're talking about in this video moving to the Premier League. I mean, you have to love it. And then they have some other like smaller transfers, some more depth pieces that I think are really, really interesting to look at. Kerem Aktürkoğlu, who was an important sub for the national team. I think he played every game but the Euros too, just as a substitute. Signed to Benfica for 12 million. I mean, bro, if Benfica buying you, that's another team. Benfica and Brighton, if they're buying you, I'm like, hey, this guy, watch out. You know, ojo con this guy. Kan Uzun, 18-year-old
center mid.
Now, this guy hasn't really broken into the Turkey national team yet, but he was included on the roster of the last edition of the Nations League. So I think this is a guy who I think you're going to see him become important for the national team, and a $12 million move to Frankfurt. But again, just like a very, very strong depth signing there. And then lastly, Amin Bayram, another young center back, 21 years old, Galatasaray to Westerlo for $4 million. No cast for the senior team, but I think he's played a lot for the U21s and U23s. And to get him over to Belgium at a young age is really, really sound. I feel like there was a lot of Turkish players who left the Super League and went abroad this window, and we don't always see that. Like, the Turks tend to stay at home, and the fact that we got several big moves here during this window, I think is very encouraging for a national team that quite frankly surprised everybody except the Turks at the last Euros. Next team I want to talk about, and this one really, really excited me, and I'm happy to talk about them, is Paraguay. I'm going to keep this one quick because I don't really have too much to say about Paraguay other than the fact that them sending Diego Gomez and Ramon Sosa to Europe, that's it. That's all we need to talk about. Those two moves alone, massive W for Paraguay. I think the Gomez transfer might not be official yet. What I've read is that he's going to leave in January, but I'm just going to include it in this video because it sounds like the agreement was basically done during the summer. Therefore, I'm going to consider it a summer transfer. Ramon Sosa is 25 years old. Diego Gomez is 21. And now we're talking about the entire Paraguayan attack plays in the Premier League. Ramon Sosa will be joining Nottingham Forest, and Diego Gomez will be going to Brighton to link up with Julio Enciso. I'm going to be real. If you're Paraguayan, I do not know what more you could have asked for during this window. This means that your starting attack plays for Brighton, Forest, and Newcastle. Like, that's pretty goddamn elite. Of course, the Paraguayan national team still have a bunch of question marks in the midfield. I still don't think it's that good, and I think the defense is kind of okay, but they have Alfaro. That's not what this video is about. Overall, absolute A+ window for Paraguay. Another national team that I think had a good window was Morocco, namely forward Chadi Riyad going to Crystal Palace and Amir Richardson to Fiorentina. Both of them are U23 players, and I think that's, again, very important for the national team moving forward. For me, sometimes when I make these lists, I'm not just looking for the superstar, you know, Kylian Mbappe to Real Madrid. I'm looking at, like, okay, who sent the youngins to a really good club? And I think Morocco did that. Now, they also had big names like Mazraoui, who's very important for the national team, going to Manchester United. And we can clown Manchester United as an institution, rightfully so, as much as we want, but let's not pretend like this was a bad move. And I think he was obviously being brought in to play minutes. So that was always kind of a question mark at his last club. Now I think that's going to be more of a feasible objective for him. So I think that's a win for both him and Morocco. And even Youssef En-Nesyri. I might be in the minority here, but I think him going from Sevilla to Turkey, I don't think that's a bad move. Because I think if you look at En-Nesyri overall, he's kind of a one-trick pony anyways. And I don't mean that as an insult. Like, the guy's aerially top 3 strikers in the world. Like, he is actually unstoppable. But he's 27, 28 years old. He's not going to get any better. He's not going to get any more technical. He might as well go to Turkey, where he just balls out. Probably going to be, you know, in the short list for the top goal scorers this season if he stays healthy. That, in the end, is going to benefit the Moroccan national team. So I don't see it as a disappointing move at all. I think if anybody's taking an L in the En-Nesyri transfer, it's Sevilla. Because Sevilla are going to miss that guy's goals. I'm telling you right now, I've been seeing them to start the season. It's been a little diabolical. But it hasn't been all good news for Morocco. I think you look at some of the moves, and some were a little disappointing. Namely, Unahi going to the Greek League, going to Panathinaikos. It's such a weird case with him because he had such a good World Cup. He was linked to so many clubs. He then goes to France, and you're like, okay, this is probably a really good move for him because it's kind of out of the spotlight, and he's going to ball out. French League's probably good for him. And now going to Panathinaikos, like, it just, you know, it just makes me a little sad. I would have really liked to see him in this new Roberto De Zerbi side. Now he's going to Greece, and Panathinaikos kind of forming a super team. And then Amrabat's going to the Turkish League as well. I'm not sure if that's like a massive L, but probably not what most Moroccans would want to see, you know what I'm saying? And also Aguerd going from West Ham to Sociedad. Like, it is just a loan move, so I don't think we can freak out about that too much, but I don't know how Moroccans feel about this. Like, I would love for any Moroccans watching to let me know. Do you think Aguerd to La Liga is a good move, or do you wish that he would have stayed in the Prem? I mean, kind of feels like a couple Moroccans like really shot up, and a couple, like, it's not like they took massive steps down. It's just maybe like a slight decrease, and that's why they still made my list, because I don't think it was a terrible window for the Moroccans. There's just a couple like, that's kind of a peculiar move, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. So that was pretty much Morocco in a nutshell. I probably should also mention Bilal Kanous going to Leicester City. He's 20 years old, attacking midfielder. I think this is a really, really good move. I don't think he's going to play too much this season, but I don't think it matters. I think if you look at the current Moroccan team, he's probably going to become pretty vital to them in a couple years. And so he can afford to kind of marinate and sit on the bench and just improve at Leicester, at least for this entire season. Like, I don't think there's any pressure for him. You know, just take your time, youngin', just get better, train, stay healthy, and then next season or maybe the season after that, you try to break into the first team and you really start balling out. So again, for like the future of Morocco, I think there's some very, very important moves here. And then with some of the current starters, I don't really think they're massive L's. They're just kind of puzzling moves. But Morocco, I wanted to throw them on here because I found them pretty interesting case. Let's move on to Georgia. Georgia, I feel like we got to talk about them. And whenever your starting goalkeeper leaves Valencia, really when any of your players leave Valencia, it's probably also a massive W. And doing that by the age of 23, it's a massive W. Getting out of Valencia and heading to the Prem, to I assume being the successor to Alisson, which are big gloves to fill. Haha, that's going to be a very exciting move to watch. And I'm going to tell you, he is Valencia's biggest hope right now. So that is a massive, massive loss for them. But I don't think the Georgians care even for 1 second. And also sending, and I'm sorry, this man's name, Georges Mikatadze, very tough name for me, going to Lyon in the French league. I mean, George is up tremendous right now. Now, I don't think he scored to start the season, but we're only 4 games in. Not going to panic. But it was like a $22 million move. So we had Mama moving for like 35. And then we have Georges moving for like 22. This is big, big money for the Georgian national team. I mean, I'll take it back to Canada, the first team we talked about. Like, sure, maybe for France, this would be an L window or even one that's a little forgettable. We're talking about Georgia, bro. We're talking about Georgia. They even sent Zeriko Davishvili, who's kind of like the backup attacking midfielder slash winger. You know, he played at the Euro. He's just not a starter for them. And he went to Saint-Etienne for $6 million. And he's probably going to be one of their boys. So for the Georgians, after an incredibly successful Euro, after a massive recent ascension of the national team, they have a very, very good transfer window. I mean, honestly, you could probably chart the ascension of Georgia and Canada next to each other, and I'd be very fascinated to see what those look like. Like, what are the biggest differences between those two teams? Because now that I'm talking about it in real time, I'm like, there might actually be something here. And then lastly, I'm just going to shout this team out. Sweden, I don't think I guess I technically have 3 European sides here, but the Swedes, I mean, you look at some of these moves. Emil Holm to Bologna for $7 million, 24 years old. You look at Sebastian Nanasi going to Strasbourg, 22 years old, $11 million. Of course, Lucas Bergvall going to my Spurs for $10 million at 18 years old. And Dennis Gul to FC Porto for 4.5 mil. Just seems like a lot of young Swedes were on the moves, and I don't think I've ever mentioned Sweden on Deadball TV, so I thought this would be a nice moment of unity between the channel and our Nordic brothers who are probably massive fans of the channel. They've just been waiting patiently for years for me to mention Sweden in any positive way, and there we go. Now you have it. Now you have me complimenting the Swedes for the first time, maybe in my life, but I think it's warranted. I think you look at Sweden, obviously they kind of lacked the talent of even their, Norwegian and Danish brethren recently, but you got to look at this window, and again, transfers is all potential. None of this is guaranteed. It doesn't mean anything for the success of the national team, but you look at this and you're like, okay, I see you, Sweden. I see you making moves. But that's all I have for this video, guys. If there's any national team that I forgot to mention, let me know down below in the comments. And is there anybody I nominated who you disagree with? I feel like people are going to disagree with my Ghana pick the most, just because you look at the current Ghanaian national team and people might be like, hey, Jack, it's cool that they sent a couple people to a couple good clubs, but like they're still ass cheeks. And I cannot argue against that. I'm just like, hey, relatively to the rest of Africa, Ghana had like a top 3 window. I think Morocco's up there too. It ain't Nigeria. It ain't Senegal. It ain't Cameroon. It's not Togo. It wasn't Mozambique this time around. I mean, they had a top 3 window for an African side. I mean, I was looking at Algeria, but no, not really. Egypt, no, not for me, not to crack top 3. I really do think Ghana, I'm going to stand on it. They're a top 2 winner from the transfer window of all African teams. If you guys want to disagree, let me know in the comments. I think I'm going to end the video there, though, guys. If you enjoyed, make sure you smash the like button, hit subscribe as well, and let me know in the comments if you enjoy videos of this style. If you guys do, if I get a lot of comments like that, we'll make more videos. It's very simple. I'm very reciprocal here, People say that I like this. I read the comments. I make more videos. I'm like a caveman. People like, I read, make more. That's literally the equation here at Deadball TV. So I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one.